I'm thrilled to be joined today by Dustin Lanterman, the Communications Director at the Saratoga Automobile Museum. Dustin, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, sir.
You've got a fabulous facility up there. You've got all kinds of things going on. Let's start at the high level. Tell me about the museum.
So the museum originally was an idea that had come about in probably the late 90s by Carol Cook. He was really kind of the person who had the original idea to bring an auto museum to Saratoga Springs. They chose the Saratoga Spa State Park. Of course, there were a couple of buildings that were deactivated at the time, one being the bottling plant, the other being the Roosevelt II bathhouse. So they chose the bottling plant because of its size. It's availability close to the Avenue of the Pines. Its proximity to Route 50. Just really because of it had great architecture, lines, space. So it really was kind of the best option for them to have a museum. The renovation started in 2001 and were finished early 2002. And then the museum opened to the public on June 1st of 2002.
Wow. Someone arrives at the museum. Tell me, generally speaking, what they're going to find there. Tell me a little bit about the collection, and then we'll follow up and talk a little bit about your special events.
Absolutely. So when people arrive at the museum, I think they're first greeted by the architecture. The building stands out. It's the classic revival architecture of the building with the big palladium windows. It's very welcoming. It's very beautiful. People love to take pictures of it, myself included. And then when you come into the building, you kind of have a sense of the openness of the museum. It's very airy. So then you go from there and you start seeing the cars. Downstairs is always changing. It's always usually about 6 months. So right now we're in the beginning part to the middle of the Dyson collection, which is Rob Dyson's, a lot of his race car collection and private collection out of Poughkeepsie, New York. So we have a Porsche 962. We have quite a few McLaren Indy cars that are owned by him, a couple that came from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We have a couple of his personal Ford Model A's, one of which he owned in high school and still drives today.
Wow.
He actually picks people up at the airport in that car. So he still has a love of Model A's. I think he has somewhere around 13 to 14 of them. So this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Wow.
For Model A's and Rob Dyson. But we have a lot of early Indy cars, 1913 Isetta Francini, which was one of the first cars to really race, a foreign car to race Indianapolis back in the 1900s. And then right up to, a modern LMP car, the Lolas, the MG Lola, and of course the Lola that we have that they donated to the museum in 2017. So on the second floor, we have two static exhibits that were part of our charter. One of them is East of Detroit, which focuses on cars built and produced in New York State from the very early years up until most recently. And then we also have Racing in New York, which covers pretty much every single aspect of racing in New York State, with a heavy emphasis on Watkins Glen. Mm-hmm. Obviously, its importance in NASCAR and the Grand Prix, starting after World War II. We really have a little bit of everything that people would love to see. I mean, there's including the 1928, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the 1928 Franklin Airman sedan that was owned by Charles Lindbergh himself. It was given to him by the Franklin Motor Car Company as a way kind of for them to really kind of cash in on his transatlantic flight. So he went to Syracuse, picked up the car. He courted his wife in the car. He transported dignitaries in the car. And one of our going sayings amongst the staff is, if that car could talk, imagine the stories it would tell. And of course, we have a 1931 Pierce Arrow, which is, the height of New York State luxury, as I like to say. Pierce Arrow was a very large automotive company that was eventually bought out by Studebaker in the early 30s, kind of around the time that the Great Depression was beginning. So just to think that we had these giant luxury land yachts that were built in New York State at the time is really quite something to see.
Now, I want to focus on an upcoming event you have, which is a very high-profile auction.
Yes.
And you are showcasing currently some of the cars that will be in that auction. Let's talk about some of those. Number one, something that caught my eye at my recent visit there was the evil Christine car from the movie Christine. Tell me about that.
So this is one of 16 actual cars that was used in production of the movie.
Wow.
From what we've read and what's been documented so far, is that this car was used for close-ups in the movie. So there were cars that were crashed, there were cars that were crushed and burned and relatively destroyed. This one was one of the cars that they used for close-ups, and it was driven by the director himself to and from the set. So John Carpenter actually drove this car, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It received a slight restoration a couple of years ago. It runs and sounds beautiful. We've tried to stay away from turning the lights off upstairs with the car in the building because it's, we don't want it's tempt fate of any kind. So it's just an absolutely beautiful car. And this is, the authentic real movie car that somebody can own as it's going across the stage on Saturday. And we're hoping that some lucky winner will get to have Christine in their garage in the future.
Wow, that could be good and bad luck. Who knows how that goes, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the Pierce Arrow. Is that also on the auction block?
It is. We felt that it was time after, almost 19 years of it being in the museum. It was time for its next chapter. It's well loved by the staff and volunteers and the visitors to the museum. But we figured it's time for its next chapter. It's time for it to be back out on the road. It needs to be enjoyed in the sunlight. So we're hoping, and we're fairly certain that an avid Pierce Arrow or luxury American car collector will own this and really take care of it and kind of lead it into its next chapter of her life. I mean, we absolutely love the car, and we're happy to see it kind of go on to that next phase.
So let me follow up. Tell me again about the auction and where and when it's being held. Give me the details.
So the Saratoga Motor Car Auction is our 4th annual auction. It's usually held at SPAC every year, but unfortunately due to COVID circumstances this year, it's being held on the grounds in the Saratoga Spa State Park. We've worked with the governor's office. We've worked with New York State and the park system. And all of our partners here in the park really have been wonderful. SPAC has been wonderful. The park itself has been wonderful. Discover Saratoga, the chamber, the city center. We really couldn't have done it without their assistance. So it will be a one-day event this year, Saturday, September 19th, actually this Saturday. It's going to be a long day. We've got probably close to 250 lots total. That includes automobilia and vehicles.
Wow.
We have a little bit of something for everybody. And this is the largest annual fundraiser for the museum. So all of the proceeds, on the buyer's premium and seller's premium come back to the museum. So this is how we keep the museum going and help fund our educational and exhibit programs.
Where can people register to get involved?
People can register right online. We're offering 3 different ways to bid: live in person. Of course, the auction is only open to bidders and consigners this year. Unfortunately, we can't have spectators due to COVID. Or they can bid from the comfort of their homes online or by phone.
Dustin Lanterman of the Saratoga Auto Museum. Dustin, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, sir. We greatly appreciate it.